So what are some of the key traits that you look for despite a very good resume that you receive to spot on leadership talent?
I have been doing this for 15 odd years now. I've realized that there are some traits which are very consistent. People who have that learning agility with them, right? Irrespective of age, irrespective of experience, right? It's a very, very important.
What are the signals or patterns that you have in your mind that you try to notice in somebody's behavior, narration?
I'm looking for a CEO, say, for a 4,000 crore business. Whether it is a textile business, whether it is a 10-minute delivery business, every business has operational issues. And when you are scaling up, you will have to deal with operational issues.
I didn't learn leadership from a playbook. I grew into it slowly, with experience, making mistakes, and the practical realities of leading in fast-moving environments. And as I moved through individual contributor roles into senior roles, I often wished somebody had shown me those frameworks, the lenses, the questions that really shape leadership journeys. And in the last 5 years, as I was interviewing for different roles, I found myself speaking to this group of executive recruiters who had this incredible vantage point of seeing leadership patterns across industries, transitions, successes, and red flags. It struck to me that this group holds collective wisdom that most leaders don't even get access to. And that's why this season of Transition Story, called Leadership Unboxed, exists. Leadership Unboxed explores leadership entirely through the executive recruiter's lens. How potential is identified, how fit is valued, and what truly differentiates exceptional leadership in today's world of growing Indian enterprises, GCCs, SaaS providers, and a lot of companies running their transformation agenda from India. India is a global emerging talent hub. Leadership expectations are changing faster than most careers evolve. My workplace in my operating role allows me to grow leaders, handful of them at a time. But this podcast gives me an opportunity to contribute to the next generation of leadership development at scale. So this season is dedicated to every mid-manager, every rising executive, and every aspiring leader who wants to grow faster than what I did. Not just through experience like I did, but through insight. So this is my way of passing on what I wish I had earlier. And this is my invitation to all of you to rise with intention. Welcome to Leadership Unboxed. Hi Prerna, it is so nice to see you.
Hi Pamela, good to connect with you. Firstly, thank you for this opportunity, right? And I'm happy to share my insights as to how an executive search consultant or a recruiter looks at people, right? And what is it that goes on into our minds.
Let's start with something very foundational, right? India as a market has diverse segments, right? We have India enterprise companies. We have a lot of startups which have sprawled across the country. Huge concentration in certain hubs like Bangalore, Delhi, NCR. We always had the GSIs, like partner firms, and we had the consulting firms which have been there for more than 4-5 decades now. And of late we see a big boom, global capability centers with such a diverse fragment. How do you really spot leadership potential early on? Like you said, you meet so many people, right? So what are some of the key traits that you look for despite a very good resume that you receive to spot on leadership talent?
I have been doing this for 15 odd years now, and I've realized that there are some traits which are very consistent, right? And those are what make or break a leader, right? And irrespective of which industry the person comes from, which background the person comes from, right? These are traits which define how you are going to be when you are a leader, right? Are you going to be a boss or are you going to be a leader? The first one, which I personally feel, and this is something which is very important in today's day and age, right, would be learning agility and curiosity. We have heard this many times that, asking the right questions is more important than having all the answers, right? So people who are naturally quite curious, tend to ask the right questions. People who have that learning agility with them, right, irrespective of age, irrespective of experience, right? It's a very, very important aspect today because around us, the world is changing faster than what we could imagine. Technology is shaping the world. Along with that, geopolitical dynamics, right? What holds good today will not hold good tomorrow. So in that case, someone who doesn't have the learning agility will definitely have difficulty in adjusting to different scenarios. The second, which I think is very important for any leader to have, is resilience, right? And how do you spot that? Life throws you, right? Nobody can be successful all the time, and people are going to have setbacks, right? You do realize that, right? There are very few people whose career is always in a linear upward trajectory, right? You will come across speed bumps, right? And when you come across that, how do you respond? Right. Third is calculated risk taking ability, right? So people who have, probably early on in their career taken a very calculated risk of joining a startup or of shifting career paths, or people who in their current organization are always trusted with the ability of building a new business. These are the people who have the risk taking ability because they are ready to leave their comfort zone, they're ready to step into new shoes and ready to see where it takes them. That quality is very important. And last but not the least, and I think this also defines a leader, is confidence without arrogance and a team first mindset. When I started my career 15 years ago, I started my career with campus hiring, very different from what I do today, right? And I realized that a senior of mine, whenever we used to go to campuses, a senior of mine would always ask a question to the students, do you play a sport? And if yes, which sport do you play? Right now, I understand the importance of that question. People who play team sports naturally have that mindset, which is a team first mindset, right? So these are some 3-4 qualities that I personally look for whenever I'm meeting people and talking to them.
So these are your early indicators of
Yeah.
qualifying in your mind. Okay, this is a great potential candidate.
Yeah.
And the resilience part that you mentioned, taking early risks and all. A short story from my side. When my startup didn't work. Okay, and I was looking for a job because I ran out of funds. I came back to the workforce. But in those days, I had no awareness that you can wear the failure on your sleeve, right?
Yeah.
The failure had taught me a lot of things because I realized that cash management early on was very important in a startup, which I didn't have knowledge, skills, whatever you call it, right? I couldn't learn on the job. So when I came back to the workforce, in my interviews, I categorically, kind of silenced this whole story. It so happened that I was in a leadership program in one of the jobs that I took after the startup failure. And the leadership coach kept on digging a little deeper. And, then he said, why don't you talk about it? And that kind of, resonated. He said, this shows your risk taking appetite. This, you did take a risk when you had no knowledge of the market that you were trying to launch this software company in. You took some early risks by deploying cash from your pocket. You did not raise funds. So all of this are traits of somebody who is ready to take on things head on.
Definitely.
Right? Resilience and risk taking appetite, of course, I'm with you. Yeah. Now that you've spotted the leadership potential, right? But it's also very important. I've seen when, executive search firms look at candidates, when I myself talk to executive search firms, they always in their mind, I feel they're reading me that, will she scale? Because whenever they're hiring for a leadership role, this leader has to business scaling, right? So the company may be at point A and you're going to manage the business at that position, but the job is to take it to B and probably C, right? They will not change leaders every time they move from one point to another. So what are the signals or patterns that you have in your mind that you try to notice in somebody's behavior, narration, which tells you, a heavy tick on the fact that this person will scale?
For example, when I'm hiring a company which is India's largest conglomerate, let me just put up lightweight, or I'm hiring for a CXO or a CEO for, say, a specialty chemical company, which is the biggest in this sector, right? There are only so many people who would have handled scale. We look for potential. I'm looking for a CEO, say, for a 4,000 crore business. Let me just put it that way, right? And in a very specialized or a niche sector. So obviously my talent pool is limited. And if I'm able to close it within that, well and good. But what we kind of not dismisses people who would have managed businesses of, say, even a 2,000 or a 2,500 crores. But when they took over this particular business, say it was a 800 or a 500 crore business, right? So you may have not managed a 4,000, 5,000 or an 800 crore business, 8,000 crore business today. But in your particular business that you are working in, have you been able to scale it up right since the day you took over, right? Which means you know how to scale businesses up, you know how to take people along, and you know what complexities come with scaling up, right? One thing is that you manage a scale which is a stable business, right? But if you're looking to hire for a company which is going to grow from a 4,000 crore to 6,000 crore or an 8,000 crore, then there are complexities which come with scaling up. There are a lot of operational issues that come with scaling up. You need to have someone who's strategic. You need to have someone who's hands-on as well, because the kind of operational issues which will come up for someone who just comes with a strategic mindset or a consulting mindset, it will not work. Every business, whether it is a textile business, whether it is a 10-minute delivery business, every business has operational issues. And when you are scaling up, you will have to deal with operational issues. So strategy looks good on paper. It is important. You need to know where you want to go and why you want to go. But how you will get there is what will seamless operations take you. So being hands-on in this case, someone who's hands-on, someone who's operationally strong, and at the same time has the big picture view would be the kind of person that, ideally I personally would look for as an executive search recruiter.
So I made some notes and, very profound stuff you said right now. You look for potential, may not have done a 8,000 crore business or a 4,000 crore business, but has the person scaled from X to Y, right?
Yeah.
And then try to spot or understand from them on what were the challenges they came across, they overcame, right? It is a lot about having the experience, and you said hands-on, right? So for the audience, a key takeaway is leadership is a very fine balance between having the right strategy in place but ability to execute. So hands-on means you should have the ability to execute. And this was, a couple of years back, a leader of mine told me this, and it stuck to me for many years, that whenever you are trying to be a leader, you don't skip steps, right? So if you're managing a team of directs who have teams under them, and each of those roles could be project manager, developer, I'm in the software technology space, right? So these are the kind of roles. So he said, you should have lived most of the roles by now till you start leading them, right?
Yeah.
People who jump steps have to be either insanely ingrained with some born qualities, or, leaders are not born, they are made.
Yeah.
Then you probably have to really practice and do everything so that
Yeah.
by the time you go into that position, you exactly know what are the operational challenges of a project manager who is racing against time and having resourcing challenges to deliver a project at cost, right? Or with profit. So very much with you. Now we'll shift a little bit of gears, right? You would have hired across industries, right? Or across segments. As I started the conversation with, we have global capability centers, we have consulting firms, we have large India enterprises. Do you observe some nuances in how leadership requires to be in a certain shape and form in any of these industries? Or it's like one size fits all? Any leader who has scaled any kind of business can go to a diverse segment and still continue to lead?
Every sector, especially sectors which are highly regulated, right, have their own nuances. So you look at healthcare, you look at financial services, you look at energy, you look at power. These are highly regulated sectors, and for a reason. Fungibility of talent across these sectors comes down, right? Because for anybody who's a CXO in these sectors, they need to keep themselves updated with the local laws, with the regulations, with the geopolitical dynamics, because all of these influence your customer, influence your market, influence decision making, right? Compare that to, say, your new age digital startup, right? Where you are looking to push the boundaries of innovation. There, the kind of CXO that you require is very different, right? Basically, you're looking for people who are open to experimentation, people who can think out of the box, people who can push the boundaries of what technology can do for you, right? Who can imagine the future, right? Come up with something extremely wacky, see if it works, if it doesn't work, good, we tried it, and so on and so forth, right? You can't look for people like that when you're hiring for an energy company, when you're hiring for a medical devices company, when you're hiring for a financial services company, because there is only so much that you can do within the permit and the purview of the laws of the land, the regulations, and things like that, right? So that's one aspect. The second thing is the culture within the organization also shapes leadership. As an organization, for whatever reason, whether you are in a particular sector or that's how you have been as an organization since the inception, how much do you encourage entrepreneurship? How much do you encourage innovation? How much do you encourage experimentation, right? All these factors influence how leaders, shape their vision and shape their strategy, right? Which ultimately boils down.
We learned, a couple of key takeaways since we started, right? We learned a couple of qualities leadership should demonstrate to qualify for some CXO roles, very industry segment specific because of the regulations or the laws of the land or different aspects that these industries require. We also learned being hands-on, having the execution ability is super important. Resilience, risk-taking appetite. See, these are some of the early qualities that you look for. And the fungibility of talent across industries, the culture of the company shaping the leader that would be made ultimately. Now, after learning all of this, it's important for us to shift gears to understand over the last 3 to 5 years, because of this huge technology boom, right? How do we really make sure that leadership development is also happening with respect to that next gen leadership profile that is constantly in an evolutionary state, right? It's evolving. People who have not been able to evolve themselves as leaders, and that is not only with respect to how they deal the different generations of talent, it is also about how they do business, because there's a huge amount of technology that we're compelled to lean into to run businesses, right? So with your role, do you see companies prioritizing certain aspects of this ever-changing profile of a leader, or tech fluency has taken a front seat, or something entirely different that the world doesn't know about, but they, leaders are being evaluated on that aspect when they are being hired?
So I think one thing that has come up in the recent past is understanding how geopolitical dynamics are shaping the market and therefore would shape or influence the business, and thus taking steps today to deal with what can happen tomorrow. That is a quality that has increasingly started becoming very important because the geopolitical dynamics are changing as fast as technology is changing, right? The way governments are reacting, kind of policies that governments are coming up with, right? You look at what is happening around us today, right? With all the tariffs that US has come up with, the kind of impact that it has had on us, on the way our country buys crude oil, in the way our country exports, the way our rupee is behaving, right? And businesses get impacted, whether it's a large business or a mid-sized business, right? Or even a small trader today, right? Kind of being able to make out, maybe this is something that is going to happen tomorrow. And if this happens tomorrow, this is how my market is going to shift. This is how my customers are going to shift. And thus, what do I do today to protect my market share? And especially for businesses which are very export driven. Second, yes, fluency with technology. And a lot of businesses today, you need to be able to do that because you need to know that whether technology will make you redundant tomorrow or not, and if yes, then how soon is tomorrow, that you can be better prepared for that. And no leader today can afford to not keep himself or herself aware of what the governments around you are thinking and which way are they going. It is impacting a lot of things, right? So these are things that companies are increasingly expecting people or leaders, let me just say leaders and CXOs, to kind of be aware of and have a point of view on. So yeah,
we have now a broad framework in our mind, right? Okay, these are the top 5 things a leader should have. And while they have this playbook in their mind on how they should know how to operate in the industry that they're stepping into, there has to be a fine balance between the pedigree, their past success, and the potential they have, right? So as an executive search professional, how do you balance pedigree and past success? An excellent profile with excellent, credentials demonstrate slight potential, but a lot of promise is rooted in purpose, driven by values. How do you balance this? Because there could be a lot to actually look at when you're looking at rich candidates like this.
See, let's just accept it that coming with the right education pedigree does give people a head start. And that combined with the fact that you will always have a strong alumni network, which keeps you constantly in demand. And these people move within a particular circle. What's also more important, the kind of impact that you have driven in all the roles that you have been in, right? So meaningful, high impact contributions delivered consistently are far more important than the education background that you come with. This, combine it with the right EQ, is what makes a great leader. You can have the best education pedigree. You could have worked with the best companies. You could have worked with all what you call academy firms, tier one organizations, right? But at the end of the day, when we are having a conversation with you and we feel that in all the roles that you have done till now, there's no kind of impact, right? Which was bought by you personally. That kind of dims.
Filters. Yeah, it
Dims.
filters. It helps you filter people, right?
Yeah.
Before we close, Prerna, it's important for us to also learn what are some of the red flags that you see in senior candidates that may not show up on a resume, right? Resume is just the best version of a person, right? But these reveal very quickly in conversations, and you have your own ways of getting your hand on these red flags. So, what could they be?
See, for me personally, red flags are more to do with how the person is at the core than the technical competency. It's given if I'm speaking to someone for a particular role, or even otherwise, if they're at a particular position, they know the job. They're technically competent for the job, right? So it's more to do with how they are at the core, right? Which is why reference checks play a very important role for me. Some of the things that are red flags for me, one is when I'm speaking to people about a particular person, I realize that the teams below him, under her, haven't grown. People haven't grown in their careers, right? If you haven't been able to grow people, then I'm sorry, but you're not a leader. Let me just put it, someone who neglects team development, right? It sort of signals insecurity. And while these people may be able to deliver in the short term, I mean, in the long term, they'll inevitably struggle with scale. The second thing is that have you been able to evolve from a doer to an enabler while remaining tactical? Have you also been able to evolve into strategic leadership, right? So we spoke about being hands-on, which is important. You need to know what are the operational issues, right, which will come up in scaling up, right? But at the same time, you also need to have a vision of where you want to go. But where you want to go, you need to have some sort of a vision, right? A lot of people get stuck in the doer mindset, right? Inability to delegate, right? And people will openly tell you if these are some things, which a particular leader struggles with, which means that you do not trust the teams that you have built, right? So lack of trust in the team, which means lack of trust in your judgment. I think last but not the least, people think making themselves indispensable is a badge of honor. It isn't. If you think you have made yourself indispensable, that means you have restricted your own progress. So people during their conversations, when I think that they're kind of boasting by saying that, I've made myself indispensable in this role, it means that you yourself haven't been able to move up either to a higher role or to a different role. You haven't enabled the teams under you to move up.
These are very thought-provoking attributes of one's character, very deep-rooted in your character, right? As you grow into a leader, how you have honed these skills, right? And as you rightly said, it's very hard to shield these attributes. They're very easily spotted. If you were advising mid-career professionals who are aiming for CXO roles in the next 3 to 5 years, what would you tell them to do differently?
So one thing definitely is you have to stay deeply informed about emerging technology and geopolitical and regulatory shifts and the industry disruption patterns. These are impacting businesses at all levels. Second, a solid understanding of P&L is non-negotiable, right? You must know how margins, costs, revenue levers work. Thing is that, you have to move away from the doer mindset, right? A lot of people at a mid-level professionals get stuck in the doer mindset, right? Delegation is not about offloading work. You need to be operationally strong, but there has to be a stage where you kind of start delegating and offloading work to the team, because you have to build the capability within the team, and you also have to free yourself to operate at a strategic level, right? So it's a fine. See, last but not the least, basically it's your reputation within the organization, which is going to move you up. How do you build your personal brand? Right? Now you can do a few things for that. One is when teams below you move people up, you train them, you mentor them. People start talking good things about. The third thing is that, be reliable and be consistent.
Things I like to package this for people to remember, right? So build a brand which is dependable, which is seen, which is heard, yeah, and which is hands-on and be extremely aware. A mindful leader who is aware about what's going on in the surroundings, right? It could be the DPDP law or it could be a tariff war. This was a very, very enriching conversation. I have earned a small crash course on, what are the attributes to embody as a leader myself, right?
My pleasure coming here. Thank you.
If this conversation made you pause, even briefly, then it did its job. Leadership isn't built through answers alone. It's built through better questions practiced over time. If you would like more conversations like this, subscribe to the channel. And if there's a question you're wrestling with right now, leave it in the comments. That's often where the next conversation begins.